My name is Robin Chavez, and I am 31 years old. I can tell you the exact second a family line snaps. It's not the shout, not the slammed door. It's a sentence said softly enough to pass as a joke. Natalie stood on a chair beside the Christmas tree, her sweater lit with blinking reindeer noses, and pointed a candy sticky finger at my son. Grandma says you're the helper's kid. She said it like she'd rehearsed. She said it like she'd been waiting for an audience. There was a beat, like the room inhaled. Then a simmer of laughter rolled across the table. My mother's eyes slid to my sister Rachel with that conspirator's nod that says, "We're the adults here." We set the tone. My dad didn't even glance up from carving ham. Paper plates scraped across the table. Someone tore wrapping paper. A radio crooned about peace on earth. Eli's hand found mine under the table. No tremor, no flinch. Just a quiet squeeze that said, "Mom, I heard it." 9 years old and already fluent in the language of swallowing hurt. I could have done the expected. Ask who said what and why. Demand an apology. Read a speech about dignity and blood. That's the trap in families like mine. If you argue, you accept the courtroom. If you defend yourself, you accept the charge. I didn't say a word. I left the cheap stack of presents under my chair like evidence abandoned at a crime scene. I stood. I took my son's coat, then his hand. We walked out past the blinking reindeer and an unbothered father and the smell of cinnamon that will always, always mean betrayal to me now. No one followed. No one called my name. The air outside carried that clean, metallic cold that makes your lungs sting. The streets were slick and the sky bruised. Eli asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I said, "Not even close." I said, "We're going to someone who loves us." Ashbury was 2 hours of dark highway away, the kind of town where porches still have wind chimes and neighbors still wave from mailboxes. My grandmother's house glowed like a small lighthouse on a street that had already shut its eyes for the night. Frank, her second husband, forever in flannel, opened the door with a gingerbread man in one hand and a beer in the other. He took one look at me and called over his shoulder, "We got a situation." Then he winked at Eli. "You like cocoa? We got the illegal kind. Double marshmallows." Grandma hit the hallway barefoot, silver hair yanked into a no-nonsense clip, the scent of her lavender lotion like a portal to a childhood that felt almost true. She didn't ask questions. She folded me into her like I was still small. I cried into her shoulder in the narrow hall under the family photos, the ones where I'm smiling with my mouth, not my eyes. When I could speak, I told her everything. The sentence, the laughter, the way Mom's lips barely hid a smile, the way Dad's knife never paused, the way Rachel let her daughter say the thing out loud that they'd been whispering for years, that my child was convenient, that my grief was performative, that my needs were a faucet they could open with a group text. Grandma listened with her whole face, eyebrows high, chin set. Then she said, "Wait here," and vanished down the hall. I figured she was going for tissues or a story about the winter of '68. Instead, she came back with a thick white envelope and a small decisive gravity. "That's yours," she said, dropping it on the coffee table. "Open it. Frank, take Eli to the kitchen." Eli's laughter floated back a minute later, something about marshmallow taxes. I slit the envelope. A deed slid out. 2-bedroom condo. 10 minutes from Eli's school. Mortgage? None. A brass key was taped to the back page under a sticky note in her loopy hand. "You've earned this 100 times over." The room tilted. I said nothing because tears change the weather inside a room, and I didn't want to spook this miracle. Grandma sat beside me like a general sitting with her best soldier. She picked up her phone, found a contact, then pressed speaker. "Jean," she said when my mother answered, her voice calm as a judge. "You and Rachel are cut off. You too, Mark." It told me everything that she named my father like another child. "Not another dime. I heard what you let Natalie say to Robin. I know exactly how much you've squeezed out of her since Aaron died. That ends tonight. Find someone else to pay your bills." A click. My mother didn't argue. Of course she didn't. People who think you're furniture don't argue with tables. When the table gets up and walks out, they just blink. Later, while I tucked Eli into the guest room under a quilt Grandma swore had healing powers, my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Make sure you send the utility payment tomorrow." Like I was a department to file requests with. I stared at the screen until my reflection steadied. I typed, "You will get what you deserve." Sent. blocked. Frank insisted on steak because apparently steak makes a plan sit right. Grandma poured wine with a flourish that would embarrass sommeliers. We ate at the small table with mismatched chairs, laughter arriving like a stray cat, cautious at first, then comfortable. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the knot behind my ribs. I slept like people in toothpaste commercials, full, absurd, untroubled. Morning came bright and ordinary. Eli built a Lego city in the breakfast nook while the fireplace hummed. Snow sifted across Ashbury the way powdered sugar falls on bakery cakes. At 9:07 a.m., my phone chimed. From Rachel. Did you say something to Grandma? My card just got declined. No greeting, no apology, just the sound of a faucet suddenly dry. By noon, panic had grown teeth. Voicemails stacked up like falling dishes. Call me back, Robin. This is serious. Your father heard from the mortgage company. Natalie's tuition is due next week. What did you do? The one that made me laugh was, this isn't who you are. People love to write your character for you as long as you don't pick up the pen. I didn't answer. I stirred cocoa for Eli and added a marshmallow because small joys are stubborn. I looked at Grandma, who was reading the paper like nothing monumental had shifted in the night. She wasn't gloating. She was simply done underwriting people who called it love. My phone buzzed again. This time a DM from an account I recognized with a tiny wince. Ava, my boyfriend Daniel's ex. Hope you're okay. Saw Rachel's post. Families are complicated, huh? Sweet on the surface, sour underneath. Rachel didn't need a propaganda machine. She had a chatty former classmate with a soft spot for mess. I put the phone down. Daniel had texted too. Quiet, solid. I'm here. Whatever you need. I typed back, just this, believe me. He replied with a heart, because sometimes the smallest signal is the loudest. Around 4, Grandma slid another envelope across the table, the kind bankers use when they want you to feel the paper's weight. This, she said, isn't leverage, it's freedom. Inside were account closures, trust paperwork, letters already sent, automatic transfers canceled, sponsorships revoked, her name removed from any account, not mine. Measures that take years to do kindly and about 12 minutes to do decisively. I could feel the day bending toward a new center, not revenge, equilibrium. That evening, my dad texted a photo, a fanned-out stack of bills, the performative tragedy of tear-streaked ink. Your mother is crying. Hope that makes you happy. I looked at the photo like it was a painting. The thing about art is what it leaves out. There was no frame for Natalie's sentence, no brushstroke for Eli's squeeze, no caption for 9 years of being the emergency wallet after my husband died. I typed, you had 9 years to treat us like family. You chose not to. Now live like we never existed. Send, block. That night, Frank told a story about crashing a parade float in 1974. Eli fell asleep with a dog on his feet. I stood at the sink, hands in hot water, and let the steam climb my face like a benediction. Somewhere in the house, the deed to a small, sunlit future waited for me. People will tell you that blood is thicker. They never mention how fast it thins when it's diluted with entitlement. I dried the plates and stacked them with an order that felt ceremonial. Tomorrow would be louder. Tomorrow would be declines and voicemails and invented emergencies. I went to bed with a key under my pillow and a sentence in my chest. They think I'm the wallet. They forgot I keep the receipts. The next morning, sunlight spilled through Grandma's kitchen like it was trying to apologize for the night before. The coffee maker hissed. Frank was flipping pancakes while whistling something off-key. For the first time in a long while, the air didn't smell like fear. It smelled like normal. I watched Eli build another Lego tower by the fireplace, his small face glowing in the quiet. For once, there was no tension humming beneath his skin. Just peace. Just childhood. My phone buzzed again. Sharp, insistent. Rachel. Then Mom. Then Dad. By the 6th missed call, I turned the phone face down on the table. Grandma looked up from her crossword. You planning to let it ring itself hoarse, or should I pour wine into that coffee to make it official? I smiled weakly. They'll stop when they run out of panic. But I was wrong. The panic was only getting started. By 10:01 a.m., the first voicemail hit a different tone. Mom's shaky voice, trying to sound composed. Robin, I don't know what you said to your grandmother, but your father's account was frozen this morning. Rachel's too. You need to fix this. Natalie's school payment bounced, and she's humiliated. We all are. Then another voicemail, this one from Rachel, her voice cutting through with the speed of a slap. You don't get to do this. You can't just turn Grandma against us. You think this makes you righteous? It makes you cruel. I didn't respond. I just sipped coffee while Grandma circled the word justice in the puzzle. 5 letters, bold ink. By noon, the house phone rang. A number I recognized from years of financial crises that always began with, sweetheart. I didn't pick up. Instead, I stepped out onto the porch, wrapped in one of Grandma's old shawls, and watched the snow soften the street. Ashbury was quiet, a town that knew how to mind its own business. My phone vibrated again. This time, a message popped up from Daniel. Morning, love. You okay? Ava's been posting weird stuff. Just wanted you to know before you see it. My stomach twisted. Ava. Of course. His ex had always had a knack for showing up when drama needed fuel. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the post. Rachel had written something about betrayal within family and people who use children to climb ladders. And right below it, Ava had commented, wow, some people really show their true colors when money's involved. Glad you're seeing it. That hit deeper than I wanted to admit. Not because it was true, but because it was familiar, the tone of women who pretend concern while lighting the match. I locked my phone and stepped back inside. Grandma didn't need to ask. One look at my face and she sighed. Ah, she said, the internet, where everyone's a saint and nobody does dishes. I laughed, half relief, half ache. Frank raised his coffee mug like a toast. Let 'em talk, kid. Gossip dies quicker than truth learns to walk. Around 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. A courier stood there, red-faced from the cold, holding a small padded envelope. For you, he said, no sender listed. Inside was a printed photo. Me and Eli at Christmas years ago, smiling under the same tree that now felt haunted. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, don't forget who fed you. I could feel my jaw tighten. The cruelty was so casual, so domestic. Grandma took one look at the photo, tore it in half, and tossed it into the fireplace. Feeding you doesn't mean they own your appetite, she said. That night I tried to sleep, but my mind replayed the past decade like a bad documentary. Every bill I'd paid, every favor I'd extended, every time they'd called me our responsible one, like it was both praise and punishment. And then I remembered something Grandma said years ago, the night after Aaron's funeral. They won't let you grieve if your grief costs them comfort. Back then, I thought she was exaggerating. Now I knew she'd just been early. The next day brought a new escalation. At work, I got a message from HR. Hi, Robin. Your mother called, said you've been having a breakdown and might need leave. We know it's probably nothing, but I wanted to give you a heads up. The kindness in the woman's tone only made my hands shake harder. They weren't just attacking my peace anymore. They were coming for my reputation. I texted Grandma, she said. They called my job. Her reply came within seconds. Good. Means they're desperate. We're almost at the end game, sweetheart. By evening, another blow. A call from Eli's school. The front desk clerk's voice nervous. Ms. Chavez, a woman named Rachel tried to pick up Eli today. Said she had permission from you. My heart stopped. They'd tried to take my son. Did she have ID? I asked, already grabbing my coat. No, and the moment we called to verify, she left. I thanked them, hung up, and drove straight there. Eli was sitting in the counselor's office, coloring. When he saw me, he smiled and said, they said she wanted to take me somewhere fun. Something broke inside me then. A clean, cold snap. The kind of silence that comes right before a storm. That night, I filed a report with the district and added Grandma as the only alternate contact. When Eli asked if Rachel was mad at us, I said, maybe, but that's her problem. He looked at me and asked, are they mad because you told the truth? And I swear I felt something inside me settle, like a piece finally sliding into place. Yes, I said softly, that's exactly why. Later, Grandma and Frank sat with me at the kitchen table. The clock ticked softly, and the fire crackled. Grandma poured herself a small glass of brandy. You ready for what comes next? She asked. I nodded. More lies, more noise. Maybe, she said, but now you've got something they never will. What's that? Peace that doesn't come with a bill. Before bed, I checked my email one last time. A message from the electric company. Unauthorized address change request, flagged as potential fraud. They'd tried again. They were getting sloppy. I stared at the email, the edges of my mouth curling into something between disbelief and resolve. They still thought I'd cave. They still thought I was the same daughter who would fix things quietly and never ask for receipts. Not anymore. As I turned off the lights, Grandma called from the hallway. Don't lose sleep over people who only wake up when you stop paying their alarm clock. I smiled in the dark. Tomorrow they'd learn that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. 3 mornings later, I opened my curtains and froze. A white sedan sat across the street. Engine off, windows tinted, unmoving. At first I thought it was a neighbor's guest. But 3 hours later, when Eli and I returned from the grocery store, it was still there. Same angle, same driver. He pretended to scroll his phone, but his eyes flicked up whenever I stepped outside. I didn't panic. I just texted Grandma, "If someone's watching the house." She didn't reply with words. 2 minutes later, Frank's pickup pulled into the driveway, gravel spitting under the tires. He walked up to the car like he'd been waiting his whole life for this kind of confrontation. Hand on the roof, voice low and steady. No yelling, no drama. The sedan rolled away a minute later. When Frank came back, he shut the door gently behind him. "They're getting bolder," he said, "but they're still cowards." Grandma didn't look up from her knitting. "Good," she muttered. "Let them waste their gas." That night, while Eli slept, I finally opened the file box Grandma had given me earlier in the week, the one she said held family records. Inside were decades of papers, bank statements, PayPal transfers, old bills. Each one told the same story. My parents had been living off her generosity for years. Trips, tuition, repairs, all under the umbrella of emergencies. But the deeper I dug, the more personal it got. In one envelope labeled 2009 to 2014, I found my own name, tax documents filed years after Aaron's death. They had claimed me as a dependent for 3 consecutive years. And worse, a credit card opened in my name in 2011, maxed out, never paid, still active on my record. I sat there with the papers spread across the dining table, my pulse in my ears. They hadn't just used me, they'd built their lifestyle on my grief. When Grandma saw my face, she set her knitting down slowly. "You found it," she said, like she'd been expecting this moment. I nodded, speechless. She poured me a glass of water, though it looked like she wanted to make it whiskey. "I warned your mother once," she said quietly. "Told her that if she turned her children into ATMs, she'd die rich in things that don't matter, and poor in everything that does." She reached for her phone. "I'll call Ed. He's still practicing law, and he owes me." Within an hour, she'd arranged a meeting with a lawyer she knew from church. Soft-spoken, but ruthless. The next few days were a blur of paperwork. Fraud reports, certified letters, legal notifications. We didn't announce anything. We didn't threaten. We just moved in silence. Quiet steps that crush everything in their path once they start moving. Daniel came by one evening after work, carrying takeout and concern in equal measure. He didn't try to fix it. He just sat beside me while I highlighted dates and signed forms. "This isn't fair," he said softly. "Fair's a bedtime story," I replied. "I just want it to stop." He reached for my hand. "Then let's finish the story right." 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was Rachel's husband, Tom. A man who rarely spoke unless it benefited Rachel's image. His voice cracked like dry wood. "Robin, please. Rachel's falling apart. She's drinking again. Your mom's blaming her for losing the money. I don't know what to do." "You could start by telling the truth," I said. He exhaled shakily. "She wants to take Natalie and disappear. Says she can't live with the shame." "Then help your daughter," I said. "But don't call me for sympathy now. You had years to speak up." There was a long pause before he whispered, "I'm sorry," and hung up. The following morning, another text came in. This one from my former landlord. "Hey, Robin, just wanted to check. Your mom called asking for rent receipts from 2019. Said she needed them for a loan application. Should I send them?" I nearly laughed. Even now, they were still reaching into my past, trying to use scraps of my life as currency. "No," I replied. "Block her number, please." He texted back a thumbs up. I could almost hear the sigh behind it. That evening, Grandma called me into the living room. On the coffee table sat a small brass key. "For storage?" I asked. She smiled. That half smirk she got when she was about to change my life again. "Cabin," she said. "Colorado. Paid off yours. I bought it years ago. Thought I'd use it for winters, but now I think you need it more." I blinked. "Grandma, I can't—" You can, she cut in. You never asked for anything. They asked for everything. That's the difference. Frank grinned from the armchair. And it's got a fireplace big enough for 3 dogs and a bad secret. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. Really laughed. A few days later, a certified envelope arrived. The return address, Law Offices of Whitby and Myers, my parents' attorney. Inside, a letter of intent to sue me for $50,000, claiming repayment for childhood expenses and emotional labor. I stared at it in disbelief, then handed it to Grandma. She read it once, snorted, and tossed it into the trash. Ah, emotional labor. I'll invoice them for raising Jean. Frank chuckled. Guess they're desperate enough to sell shame now. Before we even had time to respond, something shifted. A headline notification on my phone. Local woman arrested for falsifying scholarship records. The photo attached stopped me cold. It was Rachel. Her mugshot stared back at me. No makeup, eyes red, expression hollow. The article detailed years of fake scholarship forms, doctored financial aid claims, and misused donations from the private school Natalie attended. By sunset, the internet had already done its work. Rachel's name trended, not with sympathy, but scorn. My mother's lawyer dropped the lawsuit within 24 hours. Then came the text. No one deserves to go to jail over family stuff. Please don't push this. But I hadn't pushed anything. I just stopped protecting them. Grandma called for a family meeting that weekend. Only one topic on the agenda, closure. She sat at the head of her dining table, pearls on, posture perfect. Eli drew quietly in the corner while Frank stood behind her like an unmovable statue. When my parents joined the call, video muted of course, Grandma spoke with calm finality. Every dime I have goes to Robin and Eli. The rest of you chose silence, so now you'll live with it. This family's under new management, and it's called accountability. No one argued, not even my mother. The call ended with the kind of silence that feels permanent. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with one last message from my parents' number. We're done. Don't come around when she's gone. I read it twice, then deleted it. They meant Grandma. But what they didn't realize was, she wasn't gone. She was just done feeding ghosts. That night, I packed the deed, the cabin key, and my piece. Eli helped, his small hands stacking boxes like it was a game. When he asked where we were going, I said, somewhere quiet, somewhere ours. For once, that was enough. The following week, the snow began to melt. Slowly, reluctantly, like winter didn't want to let go. I stood by the window of Grandma's house, coffee in hand, watching sunlight drip off the eaves. Everything looked normal. But in families like mine, peace never lasts unchallenged. A thin envelope slipped through the mail slot that afternoon. No return address. No handwriting, just a typed label. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. You think this is over? Blood is blood. You're making enemies in your own blood. No signature, no threat of action. Just that, plain and cold. I passed it to Grandma without a word. She read it, sighed, then poured herself half a glass of wine. Good, she said. Let them hate you from a distance. Safer for everyone. She tore the letter into small, steady pieces and dropped them into the trash. Then she looked at me and asked, You ready for what comes next? I nodded. I'm done being scared. Days later, I drove to the condo she'd given me. Still mostly empty, just sunlight, echoes, and the smell of new paint. Eli's laughter bounced down the hallway as he tested how fast his toy cars could race across bare floors. I set my laptop on the counter and opened a new email thread with the lawyer. We'd filed the fraud reports. We'd confirmed every account. We were past panic and halfway into power. That's when Daniel showed up, 2 coffees in hand. He took one look at me and smiled. You look lighter. I think that's what happens when your family stops using you for parts, I said. He chuckled softly, leaning against the counter. You sure you're okay with all this fallout? I met his eyes. I didn't cause it. I just stopped cushioning the landing. 2 days later, the news got worse for my parents. Their mortgage was overdue, the trust was closed, and Rachel's arrest had spread through every local paper. Even people who once defended them had started whispering. And then came the public spectacle, my sister's desperate attempt at damage control, a live stream. Half tears, half performance. She said things like, People think they know the truth. They don't. My family's been divided by lies. Some people don't understand what loyalty means. In the comments, one viewer asked, Is this about your sister, the one who went to court? Rachel didn't deny it. She just blinked at the camera and said, Sometimes blood betrays you. I didn't watch the rest. Grandma did, though. She turned off the phone halfway through and muttered, "Imagine burning your own bridge and then crying about the smoke." That night I got another text from Ava, Daniel's ex. "Sorry to hear about your sister. I can't imagine how hard it must be to watch family implode online." The words dripped with pity. I didn't take the bait. I just replied, "Harder to watch people enjoy it." She left me on red. That was victory enough. A few evenings later, Grandma called for another meeting. Just her, me, Daniel, and Frank at the dining table. The air was warm with the smell of roasted chicken and resolve. "This family," Grandma said, "spent too many years pretending civility was love. That ends tonight." She slid a small folder toward me. Inside, updated estate papers, her assets, savings, and a signed letter of intent. "Everything goes to you and Eli," she said. "No loopholes, no negotiations. The rest of them chose silence. They can live with it." My throat tightened. "Grandma, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure," she replied. "I'm not rewarding parasites. I'm investing in survival." Frank raised his glass. "To peace that doesn't require permission." Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. "To starting over," he added. By the end of that week, the phone stopped ringing. For the first time in months, no voicemails, no apologies wrapped in manipulation, just stillness. But quiet doesn't always mean safety. On Saturday, Grandma's neighbor spotted my dad in town, standing outside the local credit union, trying to reopen one of the joint accounts she'd closed. The bank refused. He stormed out. By Sunday, Rachel's husband filed for separation. Word spread fast. People who once attended their parties stopped returning calls. That Monday morning, a final text arrived from my parents. "We're done. You wanted this. Don't come around when she's gone." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I packed a few bags, Eli's drawings, and Grandma's favorite quilt. Frank loaded the truck. Grandma hugged me for a long time. "You did it, Robin," she whispered. "You broke the cycle." "I didn't mean to," I said. "I just wanted peace." "That's exactly how you break it." The cabin in Colorado was even more beautiful than I expected. Tall windows, snow-covered pines, silence that felt earned. Eli ran from room to room shouting, "This one's mine!" before claiming the biggest corner for his Legos. I stood by the fireplace, holding the brass key, and felt something I hadn't in years, freedom without guilt. Daniel arrived a week later, helping with furniture and groceries. He looked around and said, "It feels like home already." "It is," I said. "Finally." That night, Eli fell asleep by the fire while Frank told stories over speakerphone, and Grandma laughed from miles away. For the first time in years, I didn't feel watched, judged, or owed, just safe. But peace doesn't erase the past. It just turns it into a mirror. And as I looked at the glow of the fire reflected in the cabin window, I saw what Grandma meant all along. You don't have to win against people like that. You just have to stop losing yourself to them. I closed my eyes and whispered to the flames, "Let them talk. Let them twist it. We survived." Eli murmured in his sleep, "Are we home now?" I smiled. "Yeah, baby, we're finally home." 3 weeks passed before I realized I hadn't heard my phone buzz once. No voicemails, no guilt texts, no sudden emergencies disguised as love. Silence had become the new soundtrack of my life, and it was beautiful. The mornings at the cabin were slow and soft. I'd wake up to the smell of pine and the sound of Eli giggling at cartoons in the next room. The air was so still that I could hear the crackle of the fireplace from the kitchen. For the first time since Aaron died, peace didn't feel like a borrowed thing. It felt earned. One morning, while sorting through some old mail, I found another envelope with no return address. My hands hesitated before opening it. Inside was a photo, me at Grandma's house, taken from outside the window, sometime before we moved. On the back, typed in bold letters, "You always thought you were stronger than you are." I stared at it for a long time. Then I tore it into 4 even pieces and dropped them into the fireplace. The flames curled around the edges, turning accusation into ash. Because whoever sent it, my mother, Rachel, or some distant relative trying to keep their toxicity alive, had already lost the only power they ever had, my attention. Later that day, I took Eli out to the porch. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in gold. He sat next to me, sipping cocoa and swinging his legs off the edge. "Mom," he asked, "are Grandma and Frank coming soon?" "Maybe next month," I said. "Grandma's finishing her book club. Frank's teaching someone how to fix an engine without blowing up the garage." Eli giggled. "Do you miss them?" "Every day," I said. "But sometimes missing people who love you is better than being surrounded by people who don't." He nodded like he understood more than a 9-year-old should. The next morning, I got an email from the university. Congratulations, Ms. Chavez. We're pleased to offer you a full scholarship for the engineering renewal program. I read it twice before it sank in. It wasn't just acceptance, it was a new chapter, a chance to rebuild a life that was mine and mine alone. When I told Grandma over the phone, she laughed and said, "Took them long enough to notice your brain." Frank shouted from the background, "Tell her to negotiate a free parking pass, too." Eli ran into the room, eyes wide. "You're going back to school?" I nodded. "Yep, gonna be the smartest person in the building." He grinned. "You already are." That night, I sat by the fire with a mug of tea, scrolling through old photos I'd saved before cutting ties. Birthdays, vacations, family dinners. Every picture was framed in the illusion of warmth, smiles that hid power plays, hugs that came with invoices. But mixed in were newer photos. Eli with Grandma and Frank, laughing under a Christmas tree made of wood carvings. Daniel teaching Eli how to throw snowballs. Me standing on the cabin porch, hair messy, eyes steady. The contrast was startling. One world was performance, the other was peace. Around midnight, my phone pinged again, an unfamiliar email address. "You'll regret this. Family isn't replaceable." No name, no signature, just the same poison, recycled. I smiled, hit delete, and whispered, "Yes, it is. Sometimes it's better." Because family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shows up when your heart's bleeding. And the people who stayed, they didn't demand pieces of me to prove their love. They gave me space to heal. A week later, we drove down to Ashbury for a visit. Grandma met us at the door, arms open, eyes shining. She looked stronger than ever, her energy sharp, her laughter defiant. "You look rested," she said. "I am," I replied. "I stopped carrying people who refused to walk." Frank clapped me on the shoulder. "Told ya. Steak and boundaries fix everything." We all laughed. That evening, we had dinner under the same string lights that once hung limp with tension. Now they shimmered against laughter instead of lies. Grandma raised her glass. To survival, to freedom, and to the day Robin realized peace isn't weakness, it's the prize. We clinked glasses, and for a moment, I felt the kind of calm that used to only exist in my imagination. Eli leaned over and whispered, "Mom, does this mean we're finally happy?" I smiled, brushing his hair back. "Not just happy," I said. "We're free." When we got back to the cabin that night, I stood outside for a long time. The stars were bright, scattered across the dark like someone had spilled light just for us. Grandma's words echoed in my mind. "The stars are yours now." I whispered back to the night, "Then we'll keep them safe." Because this wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to choose me. I'd already chosen us.